Okay, let me. Today we are going to discuss the types of injections. Okay, so last class only 1 hour I have taken. I explained about one sample application and then only scopes is explained. Today we are going to discuss about types of dependency injection. Okay, so how many ways that we can inject the dependencies? There are two ways, three ways is there: setter injection, constructor injection, and interface injection. Interface injection is not usable, so only setter injection and constructor injection only will be used. Okay, how exactly we can inject our object dependencies? How exactly our object dependencies? How can we inject by using setter methods and then by using constructors? Let's see. For injecting the required things means the dependent objects. Required things to the current Spring class means to Spring Bean. The Spring IOC container will do this in different ways. But Spring we have only setter and constructor, but not interface injection. Okay. Even one more is there, but that will not support. Now, first let's see of what is setter base injection. Okay, so setter base injection means compulsory. We have to write setter method. We have to write. So let's say we have taken off one property in some class means. Okay, if you want to inject the dependency to, if you want to inject the dependencies through setter method. Setter method means let me take off example and then we'll see the this theory part again. Shutter injection. Let me shutter injection. Yeah. So what I'm doing? So in this case, I have taken off employee class and address class. Employee class and address class. I have taken that. Okay. Now, if I want to inject the what are the values for this one? So for this, where we have done the configuration, we have done the configuration. Okay, we have done the configuration in Spring Bean file. Okay, in XML file we have done the Spring configuration file. We have done that. Now let's say, for example, employee. It is of employee. Okay, what are the properties employee class contains? Employee class contains the properties are ID, name, email, and address. And ID, name, email are these are primitive type values. Okay, these are primitive type values. So and address is of type is custom type object. It's of type address. Okay, again address contains house number, street name, city, and postal code. Okay, so these for this how exactly we can set the data? How exactly we can set the data is this is the property. Okay, to set the values, what are the properties of employee? Employee, the ID, name, email. These are the properties, right? We need to use a property tag in the bin configuration file. We need to use a property tag in the bin configuration file. Okay, property name equal to id, so this id must be same as this id must be same as this name, this one, both must be same, otherwise container cannot sync it. Okay, dependency will not work out. For that value I given as 1. What is the name property? For the value I given as Rakesh. Email rakesh at gmail.com. Address is of type above are giving us one is int and remaining two are string type. Directly we are passing the values, but address type is of type is it is of a type is address class again. So for this address class, this address class contain again four properties. So in that case, we need to use a ref tag. We need to use a reference tag. So inside that, whatever the current address, whatever the current address means whatever that 1 second, yeah, the current address, 1 second, yeah, current address. So with this name we need to create one more bean tag. Okay, with this current address we need to create a separate tag again. Okay, separate bean tag. So these two must be same. And what is the type of this one? Address class. It is of type address class, and whatever the properties of this address class, we need to set values for all of them. House number, street name, city, postal code, values for that respectively. Okay. Now, if you want to get off either employee or current address, we need to use of this EMP and current address tags. Okay. Now let's go to XML base. Now, first what I am doing, I am loading up the configuration file. First, application context equal to new class path XML application context of loading of our Spring configuration file, which you have our beans, which we have configured our bean, yeah, employee and address. This address is depending on employee. Okay. So it is there, right? In the employee class, address is also there. So in that case, internally it will refer of this one. Okay. Now go to, once it is loaded that configuration file, so if you want to get of employee information, then id is there, right? In the bean configuration file, we have user of one bean. Okay. Bean means it is a Spring bean means one object. Okay. So if you want to get the object of employee class, if you want to get the object of employee class and set the data for all the properties, and give me that object. Okay. So then internally it will create object of that, and then it will call setter methods for setting of all these values. Okay. By calling of setter methods here, by calling setter methods, it will set all the data which is available in this XML file, and then it will return that object back. It will return that employee object. Now let's run it. See, all we are getting. I didn't create any object anywhere, right? So it is doing, who is doing it? Depend internally. Dependency injection will is create the object container. Internally will create a object, and then it will set the data to by calling the setter methods, and then it is going to return the data. The proof for that is, see, employee setted method is called. Not only this one. If you want, you can add of all. So I have added one. I have added one method, right? One system dot out println. The proof for that is internally container is while creating object and setting the data, it is calling of these methods, setter methods, to set the data which is available in the configuration file while setting this value. Okay. So I didn't set directly anywhere here, right? So if you want to go to bean class and set name, employee set name method called, and you can give off a name like this. If you want, you can set email. The proof for that is this one. Internally the set email. Yeah. Now if you run this one, someone in the lobby. Yeah. Now, so along with that, let's try for getting of address details as well. Imp data address details dot get address. Okay. Now let's see. See, it is called of employee setter method is called, employee set name method is called, employee email also called. All these things are called. That means that, so whenever it is injecting of all these values, okay, that time it is going to use of setter methods. So if you are using property tag, then only it will use as a setter method. Okay. If you are using, there is a one more parameter constructor is there, constructor injection. That time we will use of different parameters. That also we'll see. Okay. If you want to use of any setter injection, compulsory we need to use of property tag to do setter injection. Okay. If you are commenting any one, then it will not work. It will not work as expected. If you want, you can see that. The data is not came, right? So for that employee ID is not coming, right? It is not set the values which you have configured. You didn't set any value. So that is the reason it is not called of setter method of that property. So if you are adding this property, then only it will call of set ID setter method. It will call it. Okay, see that again. So it is calling of setter method. Okay, this is what that. Next, go to read that points and then you will get some idea now. So the Spring container uses setter method in the dependent class for injecting its dependencies, private values or any. Okay, either primitive values or if any other custom type is also there, it will inject it. Okay, Spring container knows whether to perform setter injection or constructor injection by reading the information from the external file that is called Spring configuration file. How exactly Spring container knows whether I need to do setter injection or constructor injection? By seeing this properties. Okay, if the property tag is there means it will do of setter injection. If constructor hyphen arg is there means then it will do of constructor injection. That also we'll see soon. Okay, now in case of setter injection, the class must contain setter method to get the dependencies. Otherwise, Spring container does not inject the dependencies to the dependent object. So what I'm doing here, property tag we are using, but in the address class for employee ID, name and email, if this if the setter methods is not there, if setter methods is not there, then it cannot inject it. Okay, it cannot inject it. Now let's that's what this one. What happened? Any error? Where? Let's run it. Yeah, see, it is not accepting that. Invalid property, id, name, all those things, it is saying that. See, property not writable, compulsory, has a invalid setter method, does not, property type setter method must match. Okay, setter of setter type is compulsory required. Okay, to set the values for that. No writable property exception, so it is not able to write the data into that object because of there is no setter methods. Okay, compulsory we need of setter methods in the our class. Control Z. Okay, this is Java configuration. This also I'll explain without any XML file, guys, soon. Now this is the setter injection. Now I want to inject this data. So from without XML file, without, I don't want to do this configuration. Okay, the XML configuration I don't want. Without this XML file, I want to do through annotation. Through annotation, through Java configuration, I want to inject this data. Then in this case, we can go for one more. It is of Java based. So in the Java based, what we are doing, even in this case, I am loading up instead of bean configuration, bean XML. Before in this case, we are loading of XML file, right? In the XML file, we have configured all the details. But in this case, now I am configuring. So an annotation config application context. Before it is a class path XML web application context. Now this time it is annotation config application context. It is taking the parameter of value of configuration file. So whatever the class that we are adding here, okay, mentioning that is the configuration file, that is configuration file, that configuration file must to annotate it with at configuration file, then it will treat that as a config. Spring container will treat it as a configuration file, like bean.xml file is the right, bean.xml file is the configuration file. So if you are using Java based configuration means whichever file you have annotated with at configuration, it will treat as a those are configuration files. First it will load it. So in my case, I need of two objects. One is address and then employee. If I want to get of employee object, okay, now I will use of get employee name, get employee. So on top of this compulsory we need to annotate with at bean. Okay, this name will give employee object. Okay, if you're using this name, then that method will get bean method will return employee object by giving all this data. Okay, again internally it is going to call off address bean. It is going to call off address. It is going to create of one more object. Okay, if you want, we can write off some system.out.println here. Get employee in configuration file. Okay, next address in configuration file. Okay, now let's go here. After that, if I want to get of get employee, then use of name of the whatever the name of the method. Okay, by default it is the name of the method. If you want to give any name specifically, then we can use as a name property. We can use as a name also, we can give here. Okay, if you don't want to use this name, any name if you want to give, need to give for our bin, then we can give it here. Okay, now let's run it. By default method name is the bin name. See, it is giving us internally, it is calling of setter methods. Okay, internally it is calling of setter methods, and then later it is giving of all the employee information as well as address information both. See how this bean means, these are the names of the these beans which we have configured in this class, guys. These are the two method names. Okay, if you want to get both, if you want to get both in the same also, we can already address emp dot get address. Even employee also contains address, right? Let's run it. It is giving address. If you want to get only address object specifically, if you want to get only address object, address bin only, then in that case we can use of the last line, get context dot get bin of address. It is going to return of address object, address class object. In this case, two times it will give. Yeah, it is giving of two times. This is from the specifically address object when you are getting. This is from employee class address. Okay, this is what setter based injection with XML as well as with annotation Java based. Okay, with the Java based approach. Now we'll go for a construction. Now we'll go for constructor injection. Okay, this is what Java based setter injection as well as XML based both. Now go to constructor injection. So now till now we are using of setter method for injecting of any dependencies. Now we are going to use of constructor hyphen arg elements properties, constructor hyphen arg elements in the XML file that we will use it. Now let's go to the practical, and then if you want we will commit here. So let's read one time, and then it is easy to understand there. The constructor injection is the method of injecting the dependencies. This is also one way of injecting the dependencies of an object. Okay, through its constructor arguments. So we'll create a one constructor, and then through that constructor parameters will pass our values which we need to inject it. Since the constructor invokes at the time of object instantiation, when the constructor will execute at the time of object creation time. Okay, so the dependencies are pushed to the object through constructor arguments at the time of instantiating it. So all the dependencies will be pushed to the constructor arguments at the time of object creation. Okay, now we can inject the dependency by constructor. We can inject the dependency by constructor by using which one? Constructor hyphen arg parameter. For setter injection, we have used of setter property. For setter injection, we have used of the property that is called setter, sorry, property tag for setter injection. For constructor injection, we need to use as constructor hyphen arg. Okay, sub element of it is a bin. It is a sub element of bin, guys. That we'll see soon how exactly it will be look like. Now let's go to and see that. Okay, close it. Uh, Go to constructor injection where it is available. Let me check. Yeah, go to src config dot HTML file. So before we are used as a property tag for shutter injection. Now in this case we are using as a constructor hyphen arg. So in the first index, 0th index we are passing some ID, first index we are passing some name, second index we are passing some email, third index is of object custom object type address. Custom object type address. For that ref tag is current address. Again the constructor even this also we need to pass current addresses of type of object is address class. So before we are using as property tags, so that time it is going to call a setter method. Now we are using of constructor injection. All constructor if an arg, how many number of parameters that we have, the order also must be, guys. There should be some constructor in the employee class with these four arguments with this order only. 0 is id, 1 is name, 2 is email, 3 is address. Compulsory it should be in the same order. See, there is one constructor with id, name, email and address. Okay, so then only it can inject it. If you are not creating this constructor, then it cannot inject those values. Okay, now next go to configure. Next in the address class also compulsory there should be one constructor with all the parameters which you have given in the order: house number, street name, city and postal code. Then only it will inject those values here, and this address object will inject into employee, and then it will return that employee object. Okay, now let's go to the changes only here only, guys. There is no other changes. Okay, now let's go to our actual class xml1. Yeah, config class is class path XML application context. It is loading of our XML file. So from the in the XML file, what we have given for loading of employee. So I'm giving as EMP. Let's say test EMP if you are giving means here. Okay, or test EMP. Then we need to use of the name must be. If I want to get of employee object, then I need to use of this ID name. ID value is a test EMP. That only, then only it will return that value. Okay, otherwise if you are not, if you are changing that one, then the bin id cannot identify that. Let's say change it to emp. Now there it is test emp. Now we will not get the data. Obviously there is no bin id with that value, right? There is no bin with that value. See, no such bin definition exception. What is the bin? EMP. Okay, you are trying to get of EMP bin, but there what we have? We have here a test EMP is there. That is the reason it is not getting that object. Okay, internally it is going to call of constructors. Now let's see that if you want. See, address first it is why address is first, employee is depending on address. So that is the reason first address class object is created. After that employee class param constructor is called. After that we are getting the data and then displaying it here. Okay. So the difference between the constructor injection and center injection is in the configuration file, guys. Okay. In case of in the XML file, we'll use a property for the setter injection and a constructor hyphen arg for the construction injection. Okay. This is the XML based. Now let's see Java based. close others. Now, so compulsory, if you want to implement of any Java based approach means compulsory we need of some configuration file. So that file must be annotated with at configuration file. Okay. Now I have created of one employee object. Get employee object. So internally it is going to pass off. It is going to call off one constructor. See, it is calling off constructor and then it is returning object. We are creating object through constructor with the parameterized constructor by passing the data. Okay, internally it will call off this constructor and then it will execute this data. Okay. Mm, yeah. Now again internally it is going to add off again get address. So the get address is going to call this bin again. Okay, if you want to get only address instead of this you need to use this name. Bin name must be this one. Now let's go to see, I have used of get bin method. I have used it for first one. Okay, for XML configure get employee bin. Okay, for getting of address I'm not using get address, I'm using of this name. Okay, now let's Java based approach, click here. See, address. Okay, if I'm using of let's see whether will it work. Is it working? So we changed that bin name as changed. Get address is no bin named with get address. For that, if it is not there, then only it will assume that this is the bin name. If you are not giving this name anything, then by default method name will be the bin name. Okay. If you are adding bin name intentionally on top of at the after at bin annotation, then we need to use that bin name to get that object. To get that object. Control Z. Okay, this is what constructor injection, guys, with XML as well as with Java based approach. Okay, now yeah, here we can inject the dependencies by constructor by using a constructor arg sub-element of bean in the Spring configuration file, and constructor arg element describes one argument of the constructor. Okay, each one constructor arg, each one constructor arg will give as one element property of constructor or one argument of a constructor, which means to specify a constructor with multiple arguments we need to use constructor argument with multiple times. Okay, how many number of times the parameters is there, that many number of times we need to use as constructor of an arg element. Next, the argument specified by constructor of an arg element will be associated automatically to the parameters of constructor. That's what I'm explaining. The first argument whatever that is there, it must be same of in the constructor which we created in the model class also must match the order. Okay, if there is an ambiguity due to number of parameters due to the data type parameter, then argument must be matched. So that's what I'm telling. Whatever the order that we are passing on type of the arguments and number of parameter, it must be matched with the arguments that we are passing here and the constructor that is available in the model class here must be matched, then only it will inject that. Okay, otherwise it won't inject. That's what this point, last point. Okay, next come down, constructor injection is now clear. Now bean life cycle. Okay, what is bean? The bean means this is the employee class itself is a bean. Okay, in case of hibernate will call it as a pojo class. In case of spring will call it as a bean. In case of spring framework will call it as a this as a bean. Okay, while creating object of the bin, while creating object of a bin, if you want to call off some methods, life cycle methods, before going to create an object, and then if you want to initialize some data, and then before removing the object from the container, so if you want to do some operations, then those operations that we can call it as a life cycle methods, spring bean life cycle method. So if you want to do some operation, it is necessary to perform some of the operations before using the bean. Okay, object is created just and then if you want to initialize of some data, then we can do that by using a this life cycle method bean, life cycle of a method, life cycle methods of a bean, sorry. So it is necessary to perform some cleanup operations before the bean is destroyed by the container. So the container will delete unused objects. If you want to close off some connection, something, if anything is there in the bean, then we can use of some life cycle method. Okay, that we can achieve by using a that we can achieve by using annotations, or as well as by using XML configuration. Both we will see that. So the annotations are post construct and pre destroy. Post construct means once after construction, after creating of an object, if you want to call some method, then by using of post constructor annotation, we can call that method. Okay. Next, if you want to delete of, if before going to delete the bin from the container, then if you want to call some method, then we can call that method by annotating that method as at pre-destroy. Okay, now we'll see through practically. These annotations are introduced in Spring 2.5 to call the bin lifecycle methods, just like an init method and destroy method in the servlet is there, right? Like that. Okay, so at post constructor, it is called after the bean object is initialized. After the bean has been initialized, before this bean is returning back to the requested object. So I am expecting of a get bean method of some object I have given bean ID. So before going to return that object, this post construct will be called after creating object and before going to return that. Return an object, in between it will call this post construct annotation method, whichever you are annotated wherever you are. Pre-destroy means it is called just before the bin is removed from the container. Okay. Now let's see with example Spring Bean Lifecycle XML. Let's go to close all. So you people can directly click on this one, guys. Okay, you people can click on this, then it will get off that zip file. Okay, that you can extract and then import it. Now go to Spring Bean Lifecycle XML. Spring Bean Lifecycle XML. Spring Bean Lifecycle XML. Yes, that. So in this case, I created of one Pojo class or some bean class. So what it contains: employee ID, name, and email. Okay, employee name, email. These three things is there. So and I have not annotated anything here. So there are some methods I have written. Okay, but I didn't use any. This is XML approach, guys. Along with setter methods, along with what I did, first I have given off all the setters and getter methods for employee ID, name, and email. Okay. Next, I have created of one constructor. When constructor will execute at the time of object creation, the constructor will execute. After constructor execution, and then object is created. If I want to execute some method, what is that? For initialization of some data, just assume test new method I want to execute after object is created. Okay, after that, before going to destroy an object from the container, I want to call off destroy test method. Okay, then these two messages it will print it, right? Now where we need to configure these two methods, I want to call these two methods by the container, want to call these methods once object is created and before removing the object from the container. Now that we need to configure in the XML file. That we need to configure in the XML file. Now we are discussing of XML approach. Now see, this is of just assume that this already we know up to This is of creating of an object for the employee class. This is of setting the data. Okay. Now inside here, okay, in the bean definition. So init method means initialization method. I want to call it as a test init method. Test init method, where it is available inside employee class. That method will call it, and destroy method as a destroy test. Okay, before going to remove this method will call. Once object is created, this method will call. Okay, now let's get this employee object by using of this bean id. Now let's go to find test class. First, load off that XML file, Spring configuration file, and get off employee object. Get off employee object and then print it. Now let's see. Save it. See, employee constructor is called because object time it will create. It will constructor will call at the time of object creation. After object is created, what it is called, before going to return object back to application context, it is going to create of, it is going to call of initialize method also. Init method of employee is called. Okay, once init method is called, so before going to what I'm doing again, context dot register shutdown hook. While calling of this one, it is calling after getting the data. After getting the data, I'm calling after that register shutdown hook. That time it is going to call of destroy method. Now let's say for example, if I'm not giving these two methods, then those two methods will not be called. If you want, you can verify that. You will not see of these two things. Okay, this one as well as this line you will not see. Let's see that. Only constructor is called and then object is returned, and then we are printing that data. Okay, so if you are adding up these methods, if you are telling to the container, these are the life cycle methods of this bean. The employee life cycle methods are once object is created, call this method. Once before going to delete of employee object, call this method. That's what I'm telling this to. Okay, these are the life cycle methods calling using XML file. Okay, same that we can achieve by using annotation also. Spring Bean lifecycle annotation. Close this. Now these two methods, there are two annotations that I told you, right? Those two annotations will be used in the bean class itself. In the bean class itself. Let's so here. So everything is same. So two things I have done. What is that? On top of it methods, I called off post to construct this method. Once object is created, call this method. Using annotation, I am telling to the container. Okay. Now pre-destroy. Destroy method will be called before going to remove an object from the container. Through annotation, I am informing to the container. To the Spring container, I am telling by using annotation. If it is identified these two annotations, then Spring container can understood that yes, this method I need to call after object is created and before returning an object to the requested person. Okay. Now this method I need to execute before going to remove an bean object from the container. Okay. Apart from this, this is of loading of data. So apart from this, we need to set the data, right? Get employee data. So this is of employee data setting through configuration one. Okay. Now let's go to this one. We need to create object of by using annotation config application context, load of that configuration file app config class. Okay, it will load that and get that employee object. Internally it is going to call off those two methods which you have annotated. If you want, you can see that. See, init method is called and destroy method is called. Okay, this is through annotations, through Java based approach. There is no XML file. See, you didn't see any XML, you can't see any XML file here. See, there is no XML file here. Resources folder itself is not there. Okay, this is a Java based approach for Spring Bean lifecycle method. Okay, Next, go to the document, come down. This is the XML approach, and the above one is XML, and below one is annotation approach, Java based. Next, next one is auto wiring. Okay, next one is auto wiring. So guys, auto wiring is most very important, guys, because even Spring Boot everywhere will use of auto wiring only. Will use of annotation. Auto wire is the will use most of the times, guys. Okay, so be careful when you are understanding this one. Now, the auto wiring. What is the purpose of auto wiring? Means, so let's say I have one class. Inside that class, I have some properties is there. So how exactly I want to give off? How exactly I need to auto wire? Yes, this class is annotated with this class is depending on these classes. This class is depending on these classes. So how exactly we are going to? How exactly we are going to giving the relation between those two by using this auto wiring. Okay, now let's see. Now we no need to write off property and constructor hyphen arg parameter. Okay, now we no need to write. If you are using of auto wiring, we no need to write off any property tag as well as constructor hyphen arg parameter. Now how exactly the container will understood that by seeing that class properties, it can understood that. How exactly it means that there are some multiple types is there, that is by name auto wiring, by name auto wiring, by type auto wiring, by constructor. Okay, nothing means we need to do that. These three things, let's see how exactly one by one. What is mean by auto wiring by name means, okay, the properties of a bean will be, the properties of a bean means, bean means I can say it is a bean, employee is the bean. The properties of a bean will be automatically wired, automatically wired with the, automatically wired with other beans if the property name is same as the bean name. Property name as same as bean name. How exactly means, let's see. We'll go for example class. Was all to the project where project, yes. In this class, what is the model class I have created? Employee class. I have created of employee class I have created, and go to configuration file, go to configuration file. I have created of one employee. I have created of one employee property. It contains of name and email is there. Okay. Now go to one class, employee service class. If you want to do by name auto wire, by name auto wire, by name means auto wire by name, go to service. So inside this class, so employee service one class is there. This class is depending on which property? Employee class. Okay, this class is depending on employee class, but I am not giving any relation directly by using any property here. Go to configuration file. Go to configuration file. Just I created a bean name with some name I have given, and class, and class I have given as employee service. After that, instead of giving normally, if you want to add of any properties, there we need to use of a property tag, right, for set transaction. But what I am doing here is there is one more attribute. Auto wire, auto wire by name, auto wire by name means what it is going to inside this class. So I have a properties. So what is this property? Employee. There is one property is there, small employee, right? There is some property employee is there. In the configuration file, is there any bean id? Is there any bean with id as employee? Is there any, is there any employee id as bean id as employee? If it is there, then it will inject this bean inside it will inject that bean inside this employee service class in this property. Okay, the type, it is of name of the property, this one, and this one must be same, guys. Okay, if both are different means then it will not inject it. These two must be same. Okay, these two, sorry, this employee id, this bean id, and employee service is depending on this one, right? This must be same, then only inside this one, inside this class, by taking this by name attribute, auto over by name attribute, it will consider that property name inside this property name inside this employee service. Is there any bean with in the Spring configuration file is available, then it will inject that value. This bean will be inject inside this one. Now let's go to test it. Now let's first what I am doing, I am loading of a Spring configuration file. I am loading of Spring configuration file. Let's comment this is also not required right now. Only what I did right now, till now only two lines is enabled, right? One is employee and this employee service, but I have not given any relation between these two. I have not given any relation. Only relation where I have given auto were equal to by name. Okay, internally I will not get this one. Okay, now let's see how exactly I'm loading of Spring configuration file and get that which bin you want. I want of bin, I want of bin, which bin? Spring configuration file, yes, I want object of employee service class. I want object of employee service class. See, employee service by name, I'm getting this bin. Internally this object will be injected into this class. Okay, now let's see, I'm not getting anywhere that employee directly, guys. See, observe it. Okay, now there is no other things, everything is commented. Now let's see, from this get employee, what it will going to return, employee object is going to return. So but I didn't use anywhere this one, right? Now directly I'm calling of employee service. Now let's see, the default constructor is called, default constructor called auto wiring by name, and it is giving of employee class, employee object, it is returned. So on what basis it is going to return? Inside this default constructor is called, sorry, this one. And now what internally it is doing, it is for injecting of this employee details, it is using of this property. Let's say for example, let's say for example, if I am changing small thing, only one e is removed, one e is removed. Now in this case there is no employee, there is no by type is match, not matching. Here double e is there, here only one e is there, the name is not matching the property name. Then in this case, now let's see whether it will work or not. See, it is giving off with that it is not matched of any ID. There is no. That is the reason it is returning as a null object. That is the reason it is returning null. If we are giving both are same, this property name and the bean ID is same, then only it is this object, this bean ID will be injected inside this employee service. Okay. Now let's run it. What happened? This employee. Okay. Did I given right? Sorry. This is of double quotes, right? Mm, now let's run it. Yeah. Now let's see. It is working. This is by name. Now let's say what is by type. What is mean by type means. So now comment these two lines. Comment these two lines. Enable of the below two lines. Inside this, what I am doing? Employee service by type. This bean must be configured inside a configuration file. Now let's comment this line and enable of this line. Enable. What I am doing? Bean name equal to employee service by type. Employee service by type means now this name must be, we need to use to get the object of employee service, we need to use of this name employee service by name, right, by type, sorry. So internally, before we are using of auto were equal to by name we used. Okay, now I am expecting as auto were equal to by type, auto were equal to by type. So now inside this class there is a property, there is a property employee. What is the type of this employee property? It is of employee. The type of employee property is employee, right? So with this employee, with this employee class, is there any bin? Is there any bin? Yes, the class, guys. Now it is going to verify the class, not bin id. It is verify the class. So is there any bin? The class bin with class employee, if it is available, okay, then this bean will be inject inside this service. This bean will inject inside this service. Now let's see. Now we are getting employee service by type. Inside this employee is there. That class is of type employee. Okay. Now let's run it. It is getting the data. Pooja. The name only. I'm getting only employee name. Now let's say the type of object is inside this is, the type is employee. So in the Spring configuration file, if we have more than one bean with same, okay, now enable this. So bean is id is different, okay, but the class is same. com.ibc.model.employee, com.ibc.model.employee. Two beans, two classes are having same, right? Then in this case, it is going to give ambiguity. The container is not able to identify which bin, whether this bin or this bin I should inject inside this one, because you given as by type. With that by type is of type employee type. Okay, inside this, that employee is of type employee. With this we have two bin IDs are available inside the configuration file. Okay, both are employee only. So that is the reason I'm not able to identify which one should inject. In this case, it will give error because ambiguity, container will go in confusion, like which bin it should be configure. See, service is defined. Come down. No qualifying bin of employee available. Expected single matching bin, but found of two. What is those two? Employee and employee test. Two bin IDs are having same class. Employee and employee test both having same class. So that is the reason it is not able to identify which one you should inject. In that case, we need to comment this one. Okay, comment it, and then now run it. This is of by type. This is by type. Now next one is through constructor, by constructor. Now by type is clear. Now by constructor, let's enable it. So what I am doing? So I'm using of employee service constructor. There is a bean. Let's see where exactly this bean is available, to which class it is depending. Yes, bean employee service constructor. It is also calling of employee service, but auto were equal to constructor. Auto were equal to constructor. Inside this, there is a constructor. Inside there is a constructor employee visiting of employee object. Okay. Now in this case, now come down. Wait. This constructor will be called. Internally, this constructor will be called for that for creating of this employee service with dependent object. Internally, it is going to call of this constructor. Nothing. Okay. Before case, it is calling. See, a default constructor to avoid bin instantiation by name and by type will execute of this default constructor. Okay, by name and by type will execute of this one. For constructor execution, for constructor, for this will execute this. Now let's see. The default constructor is used for by type. Now let's see for the constructor injection auto wiring, which one it will call now. Auto wiring by constructor user, not a default constructor, guys. See, auto wiring by constructor use, not default constructor. Through this, it is created object and then injected it. Okay, this is what Spring constructor inject auto wiring constructor auto wiring. Okay, now same we will do using even. I don't want to use even this auto wire attribute also. Okay, I don't want to use this auto wire attribute, but still container want to inject my dependencies. Still I want to, if I want this object means automatically inside this employee service this employee object should inject. I don't want to specify any auto-ware attribute also. Then in that case, we have to enable some annotation based approach. We need to enable it. For that, we need to add context colon annotation hyphen config. This line must be right to enable annotations. To enable annotations which is available in our class. So this tag must be enabled. Otherwise, it cannot understood. The container cannot understood that. Let's see for that approach also. Okay. Now let's enable it. I have written one more class. I have written one more class. What this class is doing inside this class? The same employee property is there, and one private default constructor and setter method. Default constructor and setter method. Okay. Now what I am doing at auto wire annotation, we can keep on top of either variables or setter methods. So anyhow, by type and by name will be used setter injection. So on top of setter method, I have used as at auto wide. If I am using by auto by type or by name, okay, internally, then it will use of then setter injection automatically. It will do that. Let's see. Go to Spring configuration file. See that I don't have any auto wire attribute, guys. No, by name I didn't given, by type I didn't given, constructor also I didn't given. Okay, automatically that auto wire annotation is there, right? Auto wire annotation on top of setter method, then automatically the setter injection will happen to this one. Now let's disable it and enable of getting through annotation. See, so what I'm doing, this name is a bean name in the XML configuration file. So if you want, you can see that this is the bean name. With this name, I'm getting up this object. Okay, go to main. It is going to return of employee service type by type class. It is going to return. Now from that, now let's see. See, constructor is called in the employee service by type. Constructor was called. See, constructor was called in that. Now let's, if you want, you can copy this and search it here. See, it is identified. The constructor is called employee service employee auto void by type service. Okay, and setter method called in the this one as well. See, even this is also set employee method called of employee auto void by type service. So that means it is doing of setter injection. Okay. Now let's say if you want to do of constructor injection, if you want to do of constructor injection, then in that case we have one more class here. I have created one constructor. Here we have default constructor. Okay, so we need of some parameterized constructor for injecting of constructor injection. Okay, through constructor auto wiring, constructor auto wiring. So on top of constructor, I have given as auto wide. Auto on top of constructor, I have given as auto wide, and at qualifier, why we will use means let's say we have two employee classes, right? We have two employee classes. Then in that case, to resolve the ambiguity between two, either which bin, either this bin I need to use, or this employee bin I need to use, or employee test bin I need to use. If you want, whichever the bin that you want to use, you can use as at the qualifier annotation inside that, give that which bin you want to use. Then the respective bin will be inject while creating an object in the through constructor auto wiring. Now let's run it, come down, disable this one, this by type is done. Now through constructor enable it, now run it. What happened? No unique bean definition, no bean of no qualifying bean name type, employee available, expected a single. But found of two, why it is giving again? I'm giving as employee service by type. Sorry, it is using of by type. Okay, so I think somewhere in the configuration file I have not enabled. Yes, still it is by type only enabled, not constructor. Enable this and then run it. See that employee constructor called and auto, it is auto weight by constructor of employee test. Now if you want to get of this data, just assume of if you want to get this puja data, then in this case we can use of this bin in the configuration of here, that qualifier, then it will create object for the object which you created in the first one, the first bin, it will create object employee internally, it will inject it. See, now it is giving off puja. So that means first this is, now it is injecting of this bean. Okay, so if you have two multiple beans with same class, then by type will give an error. Okay, because both are same type, class type only, employee class type only, right? So that time we can use as at qualifier annotation to resolve the ambiguity between multiple beans. To resolve the ambiguity between multiple beans, we can use of at qualifier annotation. That's what we have used in the constructor in Java, constructor auto wiring. Okay, this is what auto wiring guys practically means. Okay, so same I have given through verbally also here. The properties of a bin will be automatically wired. So whatever that employee is having, same property it will inject inside this. In the employee service, we have employee. Okay, this object, this bin will be injected inside this because of auto wire equal to by name. Okay, by specifying the value of auto wire attribute as by name, we can enable the auto wiring by name for a particular bin. Okay, although you have seen this all these things practically. Okay, by name means it must be matched with the bean names guys. So if this bean is available in any of the class, then automatically this bean will inject into that respective class. Okay, now the type means the type of the bean. So by type means it is of type, the employee is of what type? Employee class. If anywhere that employee class is available, for this any other class also, all the classes this bin will inject it. Okay, same way constructor also, through constructor means we need to pass that value, that bin object through constructor. To constructor means if you want, you can see, come down. Yeah, through constructor. If it is of XML based. So if you want annotation based means then we need to use of auto wire on top of constructor injection. Okay, that's what this one. Constructor auto wiring. This is the one. Next one is properties file. Now, what is the properties file? What is properties file? So now we are loading up all the we are loading up. Let's say you want to connect to some database. The properties will be differ. The values will be differ from environment to environment. How exactly we can load off the properties file? How exactly we can load the properties file from XML as well as from Java based? Both will see now. Now, configuration properties can be loaded using property placeholder configurer bin. This class we need to create object in the XML configuration file, guys. In the configuration file, we need to configure this bin like our employee class we have configured, right? In the same way, we need to configure. We need to configure property placeholder configurer class also. We need to configure. Okay. Inside that we have property called locations. For that locations, where exactly our property files available, those list of files we need to give those list of the files that we need to share, then it will load from that from that location. Now let's say if we have more than one properties file, then we need to use we need to set that in the list of properties. Okay, now let's see. We'll see some practical also, guys. Let's go for a XML approach. XML approach. Close this. Close of load properties. What I am doing now? I have a I'll leave it about this, not this. Yeah. So I have one class. What is the class? DB connection. Driver class, URL, username, password is required. Driver class, URL, username, password is required. Okay, I want to get from where I need to get the values for this one from the configuration file. Go to configuration file. Inside configuration file. Inside configuration file. So what I'm telling, yeah, this is the DB connection class. We'll just assume of employee class. So ID is DBCon. The properties are your driver class, URL, username, password is there. What is the before case? What we are doing directly. We are giving values here. Okay, directly we are giving values hard coded. But I don't want to do that. I want to get that values from some different properties file. So now in that case, dollar open bracket db driver class. Let's see where it is available. It is available in this file. In this file it is there. Then how exactly that this property is there, how exactly this value need to inject this value need to inject here means before that we need to load off these two property file db and db1 dot properties file. How exactly we can load means by using property placeholder bin. This bin is required to configure for loading of that. The property where it is available, words dot spring framework dot beans dot factory dot config dot property placeholder configurer. This bin is compulsory required. Okay, for this bin is required, and inside this we have a property called locations. So where exactly, by default it will search in the resources folder. Okay, the location and list. Okay, we have multiple means list we need to give with db dot properties, db1 dot properties. Let's see, in db we have two values, driver class and then URL. In the db1 dot properties file we have username and password is there, right or not? Now let's run it. Now these are the injection. Now later, whenever we are loading up this class, whenever bin configuration file is loading internally before giving that context object, okay, it will load off all these properties file and it will inject the values of this properties file inside inside these all these values, it will inject it before going to return that while loading itself. Okay, now let's go to after that getting of that bean object, this one while loading the property values for this one will load from this properties file, and then it will inject here as a values. Let's go here. See, all the DB connection details is DB connection details, all it is loading from this properties file, guys. So this is of XML approach, but I don't want to load this file from the project. Even from outside also we can load it. Okay. Now that we'll see in the Java based approach. This is a XML based approach. For to load of any properties file, we need to use a property placeholder configurer. It will load this one and load of those two properties file. So whatever the key value page that is available in those properties file, those keys we can inject in the configuration file. The for that respective values will be injecting while loading of this configuration file. Okay. Now next is Java based. Okay, I don't want to load this configuration file from project. Let's say if you want to load it from outside. Okay, I don't have any resources folder. I don't have. If you want, we can load from here. Let's see. No XML file. See, guys, there is no XML file, but we are loading this one. How exactly we can do this means. See here, we need to write off some configuration file also. Yes, this one. We need of at configuration file is at configuration, whichever you are annotating at configuration, that is a configuration file. First, that will load it. Okay. So what I am doing in this case, at the property source, where I am getting the D drive, from D drive, I am loading db details dot properties. Go to D drive, go to D drive. Go to the drive, lib, and db details data properties. See, so it contains of driver class, URL, username, password, and app name. What is the app name here? Property source read. Right now, let's go to the class. Uh, so what this class will do, it will load of all the properties. It will load the all the properties, and then so inside this class we are using of db connection class, we are using of all the values. So in these places, whatever that the property file is loaded, right, in the configuration file, all that values will be injected into this at value annotation will use to inject those values to this property. Okay. Now after that, get connection, everything is, it will inject it. Now let's see, these not this from these properties it is not loading, guys. So I have given, see, if you want in the configuration file, the rest other two is disabled mode. See, the db properties which is in the class path, both are in the disabled mode. Only which is enabled is property source, which is coming from our D drive. Now let's run it, whether it will load or not. In this case, what we need to do, we need to configure that configuration file is there, right? First we need to load it. Okay. Next, get that bean object, db connection bean object. See, so where it is available, property source read. Now let's go to come down anywhere. Somewhere I'm reading of somewhere I'm reading of this property app underscore name. Let's go here. Go to DB configuration or DB connection or DB configuration. Come down. Yeah, see here I'm using of environment dot get property of environment dot get property of app name. App name I'm giving. So this value is reading from This value is reading from outside, right? That means it is coming from the my D drive. Okay, let's say, do you have that value property source in project? Let's see, we'll run it now again. From where it will load it. See, still it is showing as property file, or else let's rename it from D drive. Okay, let's run it. See, it is a property source reading from D drive, and it is injecting all the Oracle values, driver class, URL, username, and password. All is coming from D drive file. Okay, if you want to load within that, then we need to use of in the configuration file. We need to use enable these things, enable this one, and disable of this. Let's run it. See what happened. Property source example, go to db.properties, where it is, get db connection bin object, search it. Yeah, it is reading from here, but I have not enabled this, right? Now let's see why it is coming from root. Oh, okay, okay. So both is there. Okay, DB properties as well as root properties. It is coming. It is reading the data from these two properties file. That is the reason property source example is coming inside this. It is there. Okay. Font. Here also it is there, and here also it is there. Okay. That is the reason it is reading from second file, root properties file. Okay. That's what Java configuration, how to read the properties file. Okay, both I have given both XML as well as both annotation wise how to load the properties files. Okay, now for today's it is enough. So tomorrow I am going to explain with JDBC how exactly Spring is going to interact with the JDBC, how exactly Spring is going to interact with Hibernate. Okay, how exactly Spring is going to interact with Hibernate, that we will see in tomorrow's class, in the next class, if not tomorrow means. Okay, that's what for today's class, guys. We'll meet again on next class. Thank you, guys. I'll share this.